So here we are. So Docker. So Heroku free hosting, which is awesome. It natively is a Linux system, and it has a whole bunch of infrastructure built into it. They, as a company, have decided not to support natively .NET Core or .NET at all. They just haven't. That's their choice. They do support something called Docker, and Docker is all about containers and all about having a container that packages your application and ships it as is. So when I say container and ships it as is, this is taking your entire application. And when I say entire application, that's everything. But for today, it's minus the database. It's the application, what it takes to run the application, and what it takes to host the application. So what OS is it running on? What requirements do you need to run it with? So it takes an entire copy of an entire OS and plops your app on top of it and runs it inside of that container. So it's very contained, very local. So why this is powerful is that now instead of us having to hook up to a Git repo and kind of hope that production is the same, is that this gives us a way to replicate that production environment everywhere.
So this is a virtualized environment that we're talking about?
Yes. That is how you can think of it, yes. It's a virtualized environment. It is a self-contained environment.
So how is that different from, say, AWS?
So it's
cost.
Other than cost. So we're gonna put a pin in the cost because I want to make a footnote about that. But how is it different? Is that this? Let me come over to the whiteboard here because I know we all love it when I do whiteboard stuff on video. So over here on a traditional hosting is that you would get a server, and then this server is where you put your app.
That's a box.
Yeah, you can think of it as like a box. So with this server, as we know now that we're all full stack developers, this server is really just another computer, right? It's just a hard drive and a CPU and a motherboard. It's just a computer that's running your application. So it doesn't matter whether this is AWS or Azure or whatever it is. It's all the same idea. This has a lot of variances because this could be a different version of OS on which you're running locally. It could be a different version. You can have different things installed. Since this is a server, does it have all the UI libraries? Does it have a GUI? Does it have VS Code? Does it have the binaries? Does it have the same drivers? So this, even though this is a clean-cut box, there's a lot of mystery and a lot of wiggle room to what's actually running. So it could look entirely different. So you could be running it on a Mac machine, but then once you deploy it, now we're running it on a Linux machine. That might work, that might not work. .NET Core is said to be cross-platform, said to be totally ambitious. But what if you've installed some library on your machine that you're using as a side effect that you don't realize until you get to production? Yeah, your apps are small now, but if your app is a million lines of code, you're working on a team of 10, who knows? There's a lot of variation there, and that variation has caused a lot of problems before. There's a lot of headaches, there's a lot of processes and stuff like that. So where Docker comes into play, so what Docker does is Docker runs your server inside its own little box that we can control. So we're going to specify what's called a Docker file. And inside of that Docker file, we're telling it, hey, here's the OS we want. Here's the dependencies we want and dependencies that we need. And hey, here's how to run my app. So it's packaging everything up like that. It should you could almost think of it as kind of like a build script of what I need to actually build and run my app. Now the promise of Docker, now the pie in the sky goal, which we're not going to get to, is what you can do is you have this box now, you're telling how to run it up in production, you can actually develop on it locally as well. So you can develop in the exact same environment that you're running inside of production. So all that variation, all that kind of like wiggle room of what the hell's going on is gone. That's like the pipe dream, but we're not going to touch that today. We're just going to say, how can we use Docker to deploy our apps?
Like quantum entanglement.
What?
Like quantum entanglement, where two things, one thing changes, the other thing changes as well.
Yeah, like there's a really weird relationship with servers and development machines. Just a fun story. I was working on a ASP.NET application, and we were doing report generation. So we had a library that looked at our SQL server, and it did a couple queries and spit out a nice PDF report. Right? Nothing too crazy, right? Well, it was running fine locally, and it was running fine on our first production server, which was literally a box inside of the closet. But we want to put it on Azure, which is a hosting company. That's Microsoft's cloud hosting provider. And it crashed. Wouldn't work. Gave us crappy answers. And for a week, we were like sorting through stack traces, trying different things, just doing our best. After a week, we found out that the servers up on Azure, Crystal Reports depends on rendering engines. That the UI for like the actual desktop, so it uses the same rendering engine that the desktop uses. Their servers don't have that library. So yeah, so if we would have done it in Docker, we would have developed in Docker and used Docker to deploy our apps, we wouldn't have run into that issue. Because then we can actually pull down and test the same environment that it's running in.
Is that like you were missing a redistribution or something?
Yeah, it was just, we were running it on a Windows 10 server, but they were running it on like Windows Server Lite or something like that. Or it was a different flavor of Windows Server.
Right.
So that was missing all the graphic UI libraries. Because it didn't need it, because it was a server inside of a hosting. It's just running a web app. So that's one of those gotchas.
He's finding it
Yeah.
the most exotic thing you're.
Yeah, and that's fine. Because Docker, this is really one of those iceberg topics.
I always hear it I always hear it with Kubernetes though.
Yeah. That's me, like it's an iceberg topic. We could spend like entire 2 cohorts just on Docker.
Sweet. Is there a good port of Windows of it? I heard that before it was.
Yeah, I've used Docker on Windows. So yes.
So you can containerize your app and deploy it on not only Heroku but any server.
Yes.
Azure, AWS,
Yep.
Google Cloud.
So now that we're going to wrap our application inside of this Docker container, we've kind of made it pluggable into anywhere that supports Docker containers. So Azure AWS, Docker Cloud, to name a few, any sort of free Docker hosting.
So if you were to deploy it to a cloud, that would be a virtual system inside a virtual system?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, it gets much deeper than that.
Oh,
Because really what we can do is now that we've contained our application, what we can do, we can actually, so scalability is a challenge, but what we can do, we can spin up a whole bunch of these images now and have these do a load balance for our web traffic. So now instead of just one app running, we can actually run a whole bunch of apps of the exact same code.
Make a honeypot.
Yeah. And really kind of, and then sit out what's called a load balancer in front of it that manages the traffic. And that helps for optimization, for speed, redundancy. So yeah, and that's where stuff like Kubernetes comes into play. Kubernetes manages these containers. So like the deployment, the uptime, the what's running, what's going where.
what's in charge of the images? Is that the platform or is that the Docker container?
The images, as in like what's
Like you said, you can have multiple images of the same thing so that you can load balance. So what is in charge of that? Is that the Kubernetes? Or is
that'd be the Kubernetes or the hosting company that you choose to go with.
But Google Cloud or any hosting provider has Kubernetes in the background running
Yeah.
anyway. So they're gonna give you a nice GUI, a nice graphic user interface to do it, but
Oh yeah.
it's still running.
And Kubernetes is super slick. I've used it before to manage clusters and everything like that. It's super slick.
The cluster is
A cluster is this.
All those images.
Yeah, all those images together.
okay. So one image does not classify. Is
Right.
not a cluster.
One
Two
image,
or more is
yeah.
a cluster.
You could have a cluster of one, but at that point it's not really a cluster, it's just an image.
In a container, just a
Yeah.
container.
Yeah.
So VMware
Yes.
is the virtualizing underlying system to allow you virtualization. I mean, I'm trying to understand how that Docker and Kubernetes relates to VMware, or are they just sort of the same thing?
It's the same thing. They serve the same purpose, but Docker is built for systems to be deployed on, while VMware was just kind of like shoehorned into it. So like VMware, you could do this all with spinning up instances using VMware. So you can have a bunch of virtual machines on your laptop running, or on your server running, and to do the same effect. Docker just makes that a lot easier. Because Docker is pretty much saying, hey Docker, here's how to build and run my app. Do it.
So if I wanted to take one of those images and just put them in another physical cloud or physical, another virtual system,
Yeah.
that's easy to do with Docker.
Yeah.
So managing the actual container or clusters, that's an easy thing with
Yeah.
Docker or
Yeah.
Kubernetes.
And this is really, if you're interested in DevOps at all, like how to like keep websites up, how to deploy websites, how to like that infrastructure kind of thing, then you're gonna love today. Because DevOps deal with Docker and Kubernetes in the year 2018. That's just how it is.
Yeah, Docker would be a lot lighter than VM though, right? 'Cause
Oh yeah,
you
it's
need an
super light.
operating system.
Yeah, it's super lighter than a VM, and that's how it was designed. It looked what VMware was doing. It's like we can do this better and a more modern approach. VMware is still a good tool to run operating systems on, or to set up machines for yourself locally. If you wanted to run Windows on a Mac, if you wanted to run Linux on a Windows machine, or if you want to run Mac on a Windows machine, like you could do that with VMware, and that's really where it excels. But really, for deployment, it kind of falls short, just because it gets complex fast. Docker keeps things a lot simpler, relatively.
Let's do it.
You ready to see it in action?
Yeah.
That's my hypervisor.
All
So
right.
it's like really cool topics. I can't wait to hear how Cat says. It's like really immerse to all this.
We're using it in
Yeah, you're using it inside the
Well,
console.
yeah.
It's also a good line on the resume and a good talking point at demo day. So toss that out there. You're using Docker to deploy your app.
How do you spell
It'll
it?
be sound.
I think I can get it up.
Just like this.
How spell
D.
Oh,
Almost-
it's going in.
almost-
It's not auto completing. I guess I don't have the skill.
How do you spell
Almost-
SQL again?
I
Huh?
spell-
How do you
almost as
spell
easy.
SQL again?
Well, Docker I know because I was asking you that question this morning because the Vue app from OAuth 0 uses Docker. It's
Yeah.
in there. So I was
saw that.
looking at it. So should I add Docker? What is it? What's it?
That counts.
So now I know what
Put it on
Docker
my
is
name.
spelled.
Yeah, so
Now you know how to spell it.
now you know what Docker is.
Does Docker use Bash scripts? Bash shell?
Bastion, no.
Shell?
It does use shell commands. And we're actually going to create a shell command for us, like today. So we're going. So at the end of the day, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different commands to run. But what we can do, because we're developers, we like to automate things. We're actually going to make a shell script that runs those 6 for us. So now instead of running yarn deploy, we just run a script called deploy, and it works. And it will look at our code. It will build it for us. It will build the Docker container. It will push the Docker container to Heroku, and it'll say, "Hey Heroku, here's my web app. Use the latest version of this image." And then ta-da!
And it destroys the old container.
Yep, so old containers are destroyed, are removed, and it just replaces what's going on there. Which is one of the awesome parts about Docker, is that because this is such a self-contained block, you're not incrementally updating what's there. So you're not like saying, hey, replace this file, replace this file, replace this file. We're just saying, hey, replace everything with that. So if I wanted to like change this desk from black to blue, I don't paint it. I go out and get a whole blue desk and just replace it.
Yeah, right away.
Yeah. Amen.
America.
So this means we're gonna have to change all of our configurations from localhost to go back to the deploy.
So there is some configuration. I'm not gonna lie, there is one pain point today that is super rough. Not super rough, but rougher than I would like. Heroku gives us Postgres for free. Awesome. So we have our database. But it's the connection string that it gives us inside that environment is not the format that we need it to be. So we just need to massage the connection string a little bit to make it be in a format that we like. That's it.
Now with Postgres and Heroku friendly.
It's the exact same way that we do Postgres locally. You know, we can PGI to it, we can use it. Heroku has a nice command line interface you're going to be taking advantage of. Jason?
Is that any different for PC?
No.
Is that any different for Ruby students?
So Ruby students, Heroku supports Ruby natively. So-
Don't have to do it.
Yeah. So they are not learning about Docker. They just get to, and I use that term very loosely because I kind of like teaching Docker. I like the idea that you have students knowing what Docker is and knowing this process. Yeah, it's cool and it's hot. It's like a really cool thing to have. They get to just point their Heroku instance at their GitHub repository and call it a day.
Do they have to massage the connection string?
I know, lucky bastards.
Now you said it's different for PC, so you still have to use the user flag Postgres. But how would that connect with a Mac? If the Mac is visiting my deployed site. Like
It's not any different because now at this point your database and your server are all up here. Nothing to
it's already away.
Yeah. Yep.
It's running on whatever
So,
operating system.
After you deploy it, it doesn't matter what you developed on. It's now running up there inside of its own environment. And actually, I believe it's a Windows Lite or Windows Nano environment that we're actually running it on. So it's super lightweight.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Just to tie it together with the continuous integration things we were talking about.
Mhm.
If you had it on GitHub, is that what a lot of DevOps is being able to push to GitHub, and then that automatically runs a Docker file,
Yep.
which deploys it.
Yeah, so really it's pushed to GitHub, and then in a simple world, it's deployed production. So that's kind of what it is. So like Heroku or some other service would monitor a Git repository, and every time it updated, it would go there, grab the Docker file, run it, build it, spit it out to production. But that's a very nice developer-focused, simplistic version. Unfortunately, we have QAs and we have stakeholders that need to improve things. We have beta users. We don't want to deploy stuff without testing it first. There's a lot of not bureaucraticness, but there's a lot of processes that have to go in place. So really, it'd be we have a CI server like Travis CI that will go in and go, hey, GitHub updated. Grab this branch. Grab our dev branch. Run the test on that. If those tests work, and if it passes, merge that into master. All right. Grab master, run test, and verify that. If that works, deploy that to a test environment. Once we get the sign off, all right, let's move this test environment to production.
And that's very automated for some companies.
It should be, yes. Companies try to be.
It's not right.
Yeah. It's tough because it takes a lot of legwork to get there, and you have to invest in it. So like you need either a dedicated DevOps person, or you need to take a developer who's supposed to be making stuff for you to work on just infrastructure. So it's one of those like you need it, you should have it, but if you don't know technology, it's hard to sell that to managers.
Last thing is Heroku scale.
It is.
It is. So you could actually use it for production.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll see that we're going to use the free tiers and stuff like that, which are perfectly fine for like a whole bunch of use cases. But yeah, you can scale it up. All right, are we ready now?
Questions are good. Come on.
No, questions are great.
Half an hour went by.
Yeah,
on that first
and
round.
yeah, you feel smarter.
Oh,
Take advantage of it.
Wallowitz's or whatever it was.
oh, it's-
Wallowitz, I don't know.
yeah.
That's why Kuzma.
Yeah.
What's that from? Simpsons?
That's
Big Bang Theory.
That's what I heard when you guys were talking earlier.
oh,
What was the word?
What?
quantum entanglement.
No, not quantum entanglement.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you did it too. Yeah, it wasn't just me. It wasn't
Kubernetes.
Kubernetes.
It's just like, can't even
remember
the
Take off Cruiser Power. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I want to get rid of all those.
Whale.
Yeah, it is a whale. Discard all changes. Discard all 3 files. Okay. I'm gonna edit that out later.
On video.
Is that on video?
Nope.
11 weeks in, we finally got you.
Got me on video. That can't be the first time I've said
No.
naughty word on video. It can't be.
We'll be on video though.
That's a different story. So here I just want to show you what this is. So this is an API that has 2 gets. It's for cartoon characters. We have get all cartoons and we have get one cartoon. Nothing too crazy here. Simple API. We see that we have our models. Simple model. Nothing too crazy. Have a couple migrations. We added some default data inside of our context. So now whenever we migrate this, it's going to run every time we update our database. And part of that deployment process is that somewhere we need to say, hey, Heroku, we need to migrate my database. We need to update it to the latest version. So, how are we feeling with this? Anything too crazy? Do you have questions about it? I didn't think crazy. I did, .NET add package, Microsoft, did Entity Framework.design, I did everything that we all know how to do. Feeling okay? Cool. So now, I'm going to show, I want to put this up on the internet. So I'm going to head over to Heroku.com. Yes, Herouku. Heroku.
Is that Japanese?
I have no idea what that's from. Actually, I'm usually pretty good with that. Like, oh, it's from this, but I have
Make
no
sure you
idea.
get the spelling best.
Yeah, it looks like Japanese.
I'm guessing it's some Asian flair, maybe Japanese, but have to guess. But you know what? So I'm actually going to log out just to kind of show you the whole process.
And by the way, this is your dashboard for administration.
Yes. So yes, I just want to go to Heroku. I want to go to Heroku.
Incognito? Oh, you're already in.
No, Heroku. There we go. Great idea, Chris.
Thanks.
Yeah, so here, cloud hosting platform, what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to sign up for free. And, your details, it's fine, and then create a free account. As you see, Heroku is actually a very awesome hosting platform. It hosts all of these languages natively, plus Docker. So since it supports Docker, it supports everything.
Roku, they say it's a combination of the word haiku and heroic.
Oh, okay.
Heroic haiku. Is a haiku a poem?
It is. 575.
Trivia.
What's a limerick?
I have no idea. That's where my knowledge is. For some reason, I don't know what it was about my English program growing up, is that they drilled in haikus into my head. Every year I had to write like a dozen haikus. I was like, what the hell is this?
2-factor authentication.
I need my phone.
It's probably 5741992.
Nope.
I'm
Somebody's stalker.
gonna guess. Yeah, I get all those messages routed to my brain directly.
There's only
Five
100,000
ready.
possibilities.
So five.
592. No, it's 745-498.
Cool. So close. It's only
Couple numbers.
10 to the 6 power off.
Yes.
Feel free to try to reuse that anytime you want. It expires in 30 seconds anyways. Yeah.
I like
Auto
Google
block.
off.
What?
Google off.
Yeah, the Google Authenticator app is amazing. Super annoying to use for stuff like that, but you know what? Secure. So here's my Heroku dashboard. Now we're going to be deploying a new app. So this view says here's all my current existing apps. So we see I have about half a dozen there. That'll do something different, something unique.
So, I mean, for a business, they wouldn't allow you to do this.
A great business will not allow you to see their production environment.
No, I'm saying to use them for free. Is that
Oh yeah, you can use it for free.
on a business?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I mean, so what you get for free is like 99% uptime and a little bit of and an itty bitty server. So it's good to support maybe 100 people. You know, really small. Like if you have a mom and pop shop who wants a website, like it'd be perfect for that. If you're doing an enterprise solution, you might want to bump that up to get some more reliability and some more uptime. But 99% uptime, like you really can't argue with that.
They don't compete with AWS or
Mhm.
they do.
Yeah, this is a competitor with AWS. It's all a hosting company.
That's what I
I
was.
meant substantially compete with them.
Yeah, right. Right. This is a very niche kind of thing. But AWS and Azure are kind of overtaking the market. And Google's trying.
IBM lagging.
AWS
Yeah.
provides, a lot more
Oh, yeah.
services.
AWS is the original cloud hosting. Like it's like not the original hosting up like in the cloud,
Commercial-wise.
but it's like the best one.
2/3 of the internet is on it, right?
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily 2/3 of the internet. Were you around the day whenever the internet went down for a day?
Yeah, was that last year?
It's been in the past year. So how AWS does their hosting is that they do it based on geographical regions. So they have like a US East, they have a US West, they have a South America, they have a Europe, they have an Asia, they have an Africa, I believe as well. And they might have two in Europe. But they have all these different centers that actually host websites. US East went down for a day. So all websites that depended and only were in US East were down.
GitHub.
Yeah, like at least a third of the internet was broken for that day.
The world didn't end.
Yeah, and the world didn't end. I mean, Twitter was funny because
They
like
lost
develop.
so much money.
Yeah, like they were that was not good because they have a service level agreement that if like, hey, your site's going to be up 99.9% of the time. So if your site's up 99.8% of the time, they owe you money. You get reimbursed for that. So yeah, and like stock prices and like street cred and everything like that. It was hilarious. Lesson learned: always have your sites in at least 2 different regions.
Currency policy.
Yeah. So I want to create a brand new app. New app. I'm going to name it Cohort X Cartoons. And it's available. Sweet. Yes, it has to be available. Because this gives you, so now I've done nothing crazy to it, and that's it. All I've done is created a new app. If I open the application in the upper right-hand corner, I get my own URL, Cohort X Cartoons, with a nice little splash page that says, hey, I'm ready for your code. So before we go off of here, I want to add my Heroku database. Sorry, my Postgres database. Because this is just a web server, and that's it. But we have database in our applications. So let's come over here. Over here on Overview, we want to configure an add-on. So Postgres is an add-on for our site. So down here, we're going to do a search for Postgres, provision, hobby dev, free.
What's Hobby Dev?
It's the size and the scale of the database. So it's a smaller database, but we won't hit those limits. Unless you're doing like crazy big data for your final project, which nobody is. Even you, Dad. Like even your data's not big enough to hit that limit.
Is that Minesweeper? What Minesweeper's on?
Yes.
10,000, something like that.
Yeah. It's like 10,000 rows or something like that. So like you won't hit that between now and then unless you try to hit that. And it's not a big server. So it's not going to be fast enough to handle Facebook scale size data, but it'd be fast enough to handle mom and pop size data. So I added it. So what did it do for me exactly? Well, it gave me, I hop over to settings, it gave me a database URL. So this is the URL to our database. It's not our connection string. Because it's in remember I said we had to massage this data format a little bit? So that's the first thing we should do is change and configure that connection string to be what it should be. So I'm going to take it, copy it, bring it over here into a new file. So let's check it out first. So we have Postgres is now the protocol. We have random string, random string, something that looks like a URL that has a port number, and then another random string.
Right, Amazon AWS.
Hey, how about that? Yeah. So Heroku runs on Amazon.
So they're competing?
So they're competing?
Oh,
The big buy.
Phosphorus.
No. Heroku just said, hey, Amazon AWS has an awesome structure, so we should use it, especially for a Postgres.
So that's like a key value pair there, right?
So let's kind of break this down. So if we recall, how do we need to connect to a database? We need the location, right? We need a database name, and we also need credentials. We haven't really used credentials yet because we kind of hand-waved it. Windows folks haven't even used credentials before. But we need some sort of credentials to say, hey, my web app is allowed to talk to that database. So all that information is in here. We just have to know where it is to parse it out. So the format that it gives us it's Postgres. This first thing is the username, is the user ID. This, after the colon, it's the password. After the @ it's the server. Then we have the port / database name. So Ketchupfuzzy is our username. This huge thing is our password. Our server is located at this URL, listening on this port, and this is the database name.
So initially you started out that Docker
Mhm.
would capture everything you need to run your application,
Yes,
minus the database, or
Correct.
we're just not touching the database?
minus the database.
Minus the
Because what happens, if you recall, Docker will override what's there. So the option that we have to stick our Postgres inside of our Docker container is that every time we redeploy it, all of our data is gone. Because the data inside of the Docker is inside of that container, and that container gets overwritten and discarded whenever it's done.
So the database exists outside of that.
Yeah, so the database, just to make our application truly accurate, now we have our server that's running our app. We also have our database on a separate server. So now we're just connecting to that server from our application.
Can you perform SQL administration via Docker or through Heroku?
What are you planning on doing?
Things like drop tables, just the usual SQL,
We'll get to it in a little bit.
tables and so forth and so on.
We'll get to it in a little bit, but Heroku comes with a command line interface.
Okay.
Dash help. Yes. That has a whole bunch of commands to it. And one of them is PG, manage your Postgres databases, as well as pSQL. We know how to run pSQL, right? So it'd be Heroku, pSQL, then it'll give me my database.
But no UI.
Unless you connect to it from a UI terminal thing. So we know we have our connection string, though, is not that format, right? We don't want the connection string inside that format. We want our connection string to be server equals, the value, and then database equals the value, user ID equals the value, port equals the value, and password equals some value, right?
Just
Yep.
switch around.
Yep, so let's come up here, let's grab the user ID, let's grab the password, let's grab the server, let's grab the port, and let's grab the database name. And now there's our connection string. So where do we want to store this? We could hard code this into our code, like we have been, put it inside of our startup, inside of our context, where it's always been. Or we can make it an environment variable. So an environment variable is something we can use the environment to help configure what's going on. Because this Docker is running on Heroku, whenever Heroku starts the Docker, it populates that container with certain environment variables. And those environment variables are right here. So let's make a new one. Let's call it connection string and plop our value right there.
Wait, is that the whole connection string?
Yep.
Or just the server?
That's the whole connection string,
Separated by,
semicolons.
Gotcha.
So it's the whole thing. So now let's look at what we've done. We've created our application, and we've said, hey, we have a database that sits at this address. This is a good place if we want to take a quick 5-minute break to kind of stretch our legs. Let's come back at 11 o'clock, 8-minute break, and we will do the other side of this.
Can I ask you a question outside the scope of this?
Yeah, sure.
I heard that Heroku, if you don't use it for a little while, it stops the instance.
Yeah, it puts it to sleep.
So is it, it's not stopping the instance?
No.
It's just pausing the instance?
Yes.
Okay.
It is stopping it.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's you get the same server location every time.
correct.
Because with, so what is it actually doing? Is it taking a screenshot of the image? Or no, it doesn't even need to do that, right?
It's high availability versus low availability.
Mhm.
So if you're hitting it a lot, it's gonna cache the results, cache the images, keep your image in memory
Right.
instead of in cold storage.
Right.
But as if you stop hitting it, it's gonna move it to cold storage.
Okay. And that's just for them to save money, right?
Yeah, that's for the
Because
same
they-
resources.
Because if you keep running it all the time, it'll be what, like, that would be a lot of money. But if you, because it's like 30 cents an hour or something like that for this.
Not
machine?
on this tier.
Not on this tier.
There is an upgradable tier. Where is it?
Do they do the same pricing model?
It's very similar. Settings. I've never had to actually upgrade it.
Yeah, 10,000 is quite a bit.
I've never had an issue with that. But let's find out. Dynamo instances. So that's just the add-on. Just because I want to give you what's the you know what? Heroku.com.
Right.
Give me your pricing model. But it is along those lines of it bills you per dynos. That's kind of what they that's what they call an instance.
Oh.
Yeah. So like it's anywhere from 25 to. It's prorated to the second.
Wow. Prorated to the second?
Yep.
That's
So
awesome.
it's 1 second of a uptime.
And it's fractions and fractions and fractions of a penny for a second.
Yeah.
So all your deployments will have Heroku, stuck in the end of that.
You can change the DNS and everything like that. So yeah,
In
the settings.
said, okay,
Yeah, I think I just saw it like when I was looking for the settings. Yeah, you can change your domain here.
so a while back you mentioned there was some other site that you said you have or that you host things.
Azure.
Is it Azure or Google or something like
There's Google Cloud.
this Google Cloud?
There's Azure and there's AWS.
And there was the one that you mentioned that says, okay, they don't support HTTPS, but
Oh, that's a Surge.
search, okay.
Yeah, Surge. There's actually you have to upgrade to a free a paid one to get SSL. That's interesting. But like Surge doesn't provide it. Heroku doesn't supply it, which is interesting.
Doesn't do it
For free.
for free.
They can do them, but you have to pay for them.
Was there one that you mentioned that you could do it for free? There was another one that you mentioned, but you could do
Netlify or Netify?
Netlify.
Yeah, Netlify does it for free.
But
It just does it for free, but it doesn't support ASP.NET. Azure, AWS, they all give you free ones, I think. I don't know. I can't keep up with the pricing models. It changes out all the time, and
oh yeah.
it's almost sleazy. All the cloud hosters, providers.
How hard would it be to have like a shell computer that literally all it could do was just connect to the internet and wouldn't have an SSD, wouldn't have anything like that, no RAM. Well, I mean, I guess you
Yeah,
But
you need that stuff to come to
would
exist.
need some of that stuff to get on there, but very, very, very low.
Okay.
I'm talking about like a really bad computer. But you would be able to run a computer on a cloud host like Google Cloud or something. And every time, like if you were to buy this product, this really bad shell computer, you'd be able to say, all right, I want the design package. So you'd be able to like deploy an image of a design
Mm-hmm.
GUI, I guess. Maybe it comes with Photoshop. Or if you wanted a gaming one, it comes with Steam and it comes with these kinds of
So
things.
the whole idea of like a virtual desktop,
Mhm.
because that's really what that is. That you're buying a cheap shell laptop
Yeah.
to connect to a real machine up in the cloud somewhere.
Right.
Yeah. A buddy of mine tried that for a month for his dev machine.
Yeah.
Like he bought a really cheap Chromebook, and he had something up on Azure that was like a super beefy machine for development. It cost him around $1,700 a month to maintain it.
$1,700 a month.
Use a Chromebook?
Yeah, to use that idea. So
But he was running
I
Probably
really
like
like dev server. He probably could cut down the dev server to be completely honest.
he was probably running 128 gigabytes of RAM or something.
Yeah,
like that.
but like he was super productive because his machine's super fast.
Yeah.
But $1,700 a month.
See, I was gonna do that.
I know you were.
You know that, right?
I
Yeah.
know that was. Yeah. It's like nah.
Yeah, that was bad.
That was bad.
Well, I mean, it wasn't bad, but
But
it
the
was.
idea is good, financially is bad.
Well, I mean, I could just.
Well, you were going to remote desktop to your old machine, or to your
I was.
yeah. So that's
I was gonna connect to my machine at home
Through, with what?
I was thinking of bringing
with
mine. It's pretty
with
big.
yeah.
what's it called? It's a
Raspberry Pi?
not TeamViewer.
The,
VirtualBox. Wait, no, not VirtualBox. Something like that. I don't remember what it was.
It's a remote access.
VirtualBox or
well, VirtualBox is like Oracle's VMware.
oh, I was gonna use oh my god, I just had it. I guess it was a TeamViewer type thing.
Okay.
But then my friend has his company has a Mac OS instance running that all the developers just like go into, and he was just going to let me use that too. So I would have been able to just bring a Windows computer and then just run that. But it was way too slow. because my Windows computer that I had before this was an old Toshiba dinosaur, and it had like the basic Intel graphics on it were terrible. I mean, they were just like they wouldn't run anything on it.
Toshiba, I mean, that's pretty old.
I think I had a Gateway before that.
Uh,
Yeah.
how long ago was that?
I had a Gateway like 8 years ago.
Man, then I was.
No.
For me to say that, it was.
Meanwhile, I was working on an Oracle database or something, right?
I used probably code in Java.
Gateways. They got sold off so many times already that.
Hello.
Anyway,
What do you mean?
Gateway was started in the US and as a, I guess, a.
All right, so-
To Dell and all those stuff, but
We have
just couldn't make money after a while.
So we have our server and our database up online, ready to go, ready to receive our application. We now need to do a couple things. So I'm going to come over here, settings. Yeah, that's fine. Over here.
You recording?
I am recording. So the first thing we need to do, I already did it, is we need to update wherever we use our connection strings. So here is my connection strings on line 22. We're over my context. You know how we have our connection strings there. We're saying, hey, varcon equals environment.get environment variable. And we're passing connection string. Can we infer what that does? It goes to the environment and it gets the variable called connection string. And it returns it. If it's found, it will return that. If it's not found, what will it do?
Database.
It will read this connection string because this returns null, and this is our we call it one of our Elvis operators. It's not quite a ternary, but it's close. This just says if this is null, use this value.
Okay, there's nothing else.
Is it like the double pipes?
Yeah, it's like the double pipes in a JavaScript. If this is null, use this value. That's all. So I'm saying, hey, look at my environment. If you have the connection string, use that, else use this. And this is my local one to my local database. So I'm going to do it there. I'm also going to do that over here in my startup for my dependency injection as well.
And you do it in both places
Because I'm using my connection string in both places. Could I wrap that in a helper class that manages all my configuration values? Yes. Should I for a bigger project? Probably. Just so I don't have to manage it twice. So this is a smaller project, so we can do it twice. So the only other code change that I have to do inside of my code is that I want to tell it, hey, whenever my app starts up, run my migrations. So here, luckily for us, we're going to new up a new cartoon context. Because on every cartoon context, we have a database, and that conveniently has a method called migrate. Yeah, right? So we're doing that in the constructor of startup, which, if we recall, gets run whenever the app is started. So whenever the app starts up, whenever the app begins, we're saying, hey, look at my database, run any pending migrations. So this now ensures to me that I will always have the latest version of my database. We do that because whenever we deploy it, we need to make sure that we're running on the latest version of our database. When we deploy it, we're restarting our app up in the server. So it's going to be running that against the Heroku database.
So it's doing a .NET database update.
Mhm.
It's not doing migrations at.
Correct.
Okay.
It's just making sure that you're on the latest version. So it's running the update command.
So would this be the place, if you have a database and you needed external data to populate your database, would this be the place that you go out and tell, hey, go get this?
For something like if you need it for it to run, yes. There's a better place to do it because you can throw that logic into a helper function and call that helper function from right here.
So, question, what if it's empty, do it, but if it's already there, then don't do it.
It's just like running update database on a database that's fully migrated. It's just gonna go, okay, I am.
Okay.
So that's the only code changes that we had to do. Use the environment variables and then run our migrations. So now we need to add a new file. And this file goes in the root of our project. And it's called Dockerfile. It's a extensionless file. You see now that we have a little whale. The whale is assigned for Docker. There's a story behind that.
Just by the fact that you named it Dockerfile?
Do you have a Docker whale in your office?
That's not a Docker.
Oh, that's a narwhal.
That's
We're really trying to figure out what that thing is.
You want to know the story behind
That's
it?
the great mystery of
You want to know the story behind it? Like quite honestly, it was on sale on Amazon, and it was recommended to
Lightning
me.
sale.
It was recommended to me. It was like, hey, you would like this. I was like, you're right. I do like it. It's $10. It's going to my office. That's the story. So I use it as my
You need
rubber
a better
duck.
story.
I do need a
Docker file in the bottom line.
I think I have a Docker extension installed.
Oh,
I'm gonna double check. I do.
so get that.
So this is a good extension. It'll recommend it for you as well.
Isn't that a type of whale, the Dr. whale?
It is a type of whale. It's a
Blue whale.
blue whale. Do you know why it has the little containers on it?
Yeah, it makes sense.
What?
The app's all packaged up in the box.
It is because the inspiration from Docker and the idea. So who's familiar with the shipping industry?
I've seen it.
A little bit. You've seen like big like ships with giant containers. Well, before those containers, everything was shipped in its own unique size, its own unique shape, dimensions and like that. It was hard to pack things, so it was very hard to do. So they came up with this idea of, hey, we'll just sell these containers. That way we can just stack these containers and we know exactly how much can ship. So in those containers, each container can have something different. Stack of papers, playing cards, trinkets that say Performa on them, model cars, full-sized cars, airplane parts, anything inside of them. But they all fit on those shipping ships in the exact same way. So why can't we take that same idea, make a wrapper around our software, and that way we can package them and build them together in one unified way. So they got the inspiration from seeing the shipping ships. Hence, Docker on a whale. Ship it. So inside of our Docker file, we need to add a couple things. Docker files you rarely write from scratch unless you're a DevOps. So I'm going to go grab one from Microsoft. So what this is saying, hey, we're going to the from line is saying grab the image. So what's my base template? Microsoft provided a template called Microsoft/.NET, which gives you all the .NET stuff installed already. We're changing our directory to our application, copying our application, and then we're running our DLL with that last command.
If there's no file extension, how does it know how to read it?
Because it's called Dockerfile.
Or not shipping?
It's very specific, and so whenever we run those commands, you'll see in a little bit, it's going to be looking for that file called Dockerfile. So now that we've added it to the root of our directory, I'm going to create another file called deploy.txt. So this is where I'm going to put all the commands that we're going to be running. So you know how we build our application in order to run it, .NET build or .NET watch run, it builds it. What it's doing, it's building it for development. So maybe it's not as optimized, and it does things so that whenever things break, it's easier to see what's wrong. It gives us a more detailed stack trace, it keeps our names, it doesn't do any crazy optimizations for us. But now that we're deploying into production, we want to now .NET publish. And this will build our app for us for a production environment. So what this will do, this will make the binaries and the DLLs that we produce. They will contain everything we need. They will also be faster and lighter. They won't have as much debugging information in them, which is okay, because we're going to production. We're not actually doing development up there. We're just saying, here's my app, deal with it. And that's it. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to run this command. Where's my terminal? Inside of my terminal. And that's it. And what that gives us is if we go in and check out our bin folder, you know how we had a debug folder there before? Well, now we have a release folder. It doesn't give you the Docker file. So inside of that publish folder, this is our application. Now we want to put our Docker file in there. So we want to make a copy of it and move it to the publish folder, which we can do with a command. So we want it inside of the publish folder. So whenever we go to build it up, everything that we need to deploy it is inside of that folder. We don't need to go out to other folders. We don't do anything crazy. It's already right there. So the path is a bit cleaner. How are we feeling so far? The only thing we've done so far is said, hey, we're getting ready for release, and that's it.
Is Docker coming into play?
Docker's next. So now the first thing we need to do with Docker is that we need to build that initial image. So that command, docker build -t, you will have to install the Docker command line tools. I'll link to that in the homework tonight. Docker build, and then you're going to give it some sort of name. So I'm going to give it cohort x cartoons image. And then you need to point it to your Docker file. Release netcore app 2.1/publish. So what this is doing, you see, it's actually going to be running the Docker file, running all those commands, and it's actually building the image. So now this image is built and it's on my local machine.
And the image is saying this container?
Yes. It's one of those method function things,
Okay.
but yes. So we're going to add that command to our list of things.
And the image is just a snapshot of the container.
So eventually we're going to change this extension from .text to .sh, and we'll be able to run it as a script. So we're kind of building that up.
Like the Docker file, the syntax looks very similar to SQL language.
It's another declarative language. So yes, it's in the same vein as SQL.
But this is different. This looks more like .NET Core.
This, yeah, it's the same style of language,
Right. Yeah.
but the syntax is obviously different.
It's just how the deploy language differs from the Docker file.
This right here.
Right.
Yeah, this is going to be just a shell script that we use. So this is just a series of command line commands that we want to run together all the time, because they're not going to change. It's always going to be, hey, I want to publish it, I want to copy it, I want to build it, and then I want to do these last 3 steps. So yeah. So now the next command that we want to do, the next thing we have to do, is that we need to say, hey, we built it. We need to tag that latest build as what we want to deploy. So this is a, hey, Heroku, I'm going to be deploying the newest image, and I need to point to that newest image. So Docker tag.
We're to tag it?
What?
So it successfully tagged.
No. So we need to tag it inside of Heroku now.
Oh, okay.
Tag Heroku. What do we call it? Cohort X cartoons image,
I think just
cartoons image, and then we need to tag it inside of the Heroku registry. Heroku.com/cohort x cartoons/web. So this is my web app name right here. Let me double check that. Yep. So I'm saying, hey, my web app is now, it now knows, it now has that link that, hey, I have a new image coming. So now what I want to do is I want to push that image from my local machine up to Heroku. So docker push registry.heroku.com Heroku cohort x./cartoons web. Now the first time you do this, this will take a little bit of time, but after you do it the second time, it will be a lot faster.
just replace whatever.
And then since now we're pushing it up, and then we have one more step, which is to actually deploy it, or to say, hey, swap it out.
Did the username and password come in hand there? Did it come into play there?
For
Like you being able to push that to the registry, was the username and password of what you were doing before, did that come into play at all? Or why were you able to push
why was it a
without
push?
restrictions? Yeah.
Because I'm logged into Heroku.
Okay,
The
so it
Heroku
just
command
knows
line,
that you're
yeah.
logged. Oh, okay.
I'm actually going to steal these last two commands real fast. And then the very last command that we have to run is that we need to say, hey, my Heroku instance, deploy the latest one. This will actually swap out whatever is there for this new image. So Heroku, container, release, web on the app, cohort, x cartoons. And done. So if I pop over here, go to more and view logs, I can actually see what's happening. And hopefully, it should be saying deploying, so it deployed. And then it should say, after it does its thing, it will say, hey, here's my latest version of my app. It will say running on whatever port, and I should be able to go to the website. So see, we're starting the process. So this is all happening up on Heroku's services, all happening up in the cloud. Hey, now listening on something ugly, application started. So I want to go to the app. I'm going to refresh it. You know, it's going to crash because remember, there's no default homepage inside of our API. But if I go to /API/cartoons, bam.
And since this is this a valid SSL cert now?
We could have got there.
It is.
So now you don't have to deal with the proceed thing.
Right.
Or course errors.
No more. We do have to deal with cores.
Okay.
Inside of your startup, I'm
Course,
going,
of course.
yeah, let me grab that last command real fast. If we check out the startup real fast, I did add my cores here.
Okay.
Because now, where do you deploy your React app or your Vue app for your final project?
This time.
Surge,
Anyway.
anywhere, Surge, Netlify, Netlify. I cannot say that name to save my life. You know, now you deploy your React app or your Vue app wherever you want, with the API, with the URL pointing over to this API.
Oh, so I didn't even know we were so you deploy your server with this.
Yeah.
We're gonna deploy the client with.
And then the client
Something
is
else.
over here, someplace
Okay.
else.
All right.
So Heroku is for the server.
It's really bad box.
Looks
Yeah,
like a-
Roku is just for the server.
Looks like a home plate.
Yeah.
Baseball.
We don't play baseball.
What do you think of GitHub pages for deploying?
That's fun.
Is it pretty easy to do?
Yeah.
What, Chris?
GitHub pages.
Oh.
You can turn any GitHub repository into a website, but it only supports static content,
Which is just right.
which is just front end, yes.
So, if not, we would like to avoid a surge or one of those, if we don't use something like that, like GitHub pages.
Yeah.
How would we hook that up to like a domain name that we would restrict?
There are settings in GitHub pages, just like there's settings in Surge. Yes, it's the same kind of thing. You need to make GitHub pages aware that you're using a domain. Make that domain aware that we're pointing back at GitHub pages.
So, my client, Surge.
Yep.
My server goes Heroku.
Yep.
But what about when somebody updates that server? Like, I'm gonna have or anybody who posts this to that database.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Heroku.
Yep.
Gets it and.
Yep.
Replace it. Okay. Replace the whole box again.
So, whenever you say updates something,
Yeah.
Are you talking like content or like you?
Content.
yeah, so that content is now stored inside the database. But that database, you can think of that database as shared between all your users now.
Yeah.
So if you put something inside your database, then I go to your site, I'm going to see what you put in.
That database is gonna be in Heroku now.
Yep.
It's not gonna be anymore in my computer.
Correct. So now
So
you
if I
have,
want to bring it here, I have to pull it from Heroku or something.
Yeah, you
Because
have to-
It's gonna be updated there, not.
yeah, yep. So now you have a production database up on Heroku, and you have a local database on your local machine. Your local database, you can kind of like pollute with all sorts of test data and stuff like that. Production database, you should treat as sacred.
Can you do a Heroku p-SQL example?
I've never done one, but I can try it. See
Are
what
those
happens.
dates accurate on your example?
They are. Bugs Bunny first aired in
1840.
1940. That's a typo.
Yeah.
That's a typo. But General I was correct.
I mean, let's
Homer's
ask me.
correct.
Mickey
Mickey
Mouse
Mouse is
is
correct. Yeah.
1982.
Oh,
I'm
that's
gonna
all.
ask V for the answer to this.
1928.
1928.
Again, another typo of me going whoop.
V, were you was your first Bugs Bunny good?
What about 1840? Did you see that?
Yeah, I said he was
Java
doing
was
it.
just coming out, right?
What's his name?
I didn't realize that the tour was released.
You were drawing.
I'm drawing it.
Well, business.
That was in
It was.
California.
That's literally.
It was 11.
In
Of course,
1842, you were 11?
What?
You gotta put
Did you
Avatar
say
in.
you were 11 in 1840?
So
No.
P-SQL.
When Avatar was released.
So we're
It was on
going
my
to.
birthday.
So we're actually going to wrap this up. So what we do now that we have all the commands that we want to run whenever we deploy. I haven't forgotten about you, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to switch this to a .sh command. Yep. So now I have to make sure that I can run it. So give it the appropriate permissions. This will vary on a machine.
Don't you hate that? Type in your password with no box.
It needs a pace.
There we go.
Mode,
Yeah.
Shmuel.
Shamal, that's just saying, hey, change the permissions, and that 755 means stuff. But now
Hi.
I can run /deploy.sh, and it will run all that for me.
Wow.
So I would recommend creating a deploy.sh file inside of your thing, and as well as a Docker file, changing the variables to be your project, and just using the deploy.sh.
So do you know you need to run the sudo command first?
Just once, just whenever you first create it.
Does PC have to do that though? Because we're on sudo.
Yeah, you do. It's a different command, and you're gonna need to change. That CP should work. That second command, that copy command, that should work.
Right, right.
You might have to change that to a copy item instead. But that's it. But everything else works.
Can you put that last command in deploy.sh with a comment it
Actually,
out?
now, I think,
Yeah.
Windows
Oh, yeah.
will
Comment it
recognize-
That
Those last two commands.
The one you just did.
this one.
That one under deploy.
You would have to go to,
That's gonna be the same for every Mac.
but you.
Do it in
no,
advance.
no, do it as an administrator.
Sudo is an admin thing.
Yeah, sudo
You
just,
don't need to
alright.
change it to anything, you just run it as an administrator.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yep. So what you would have to change for your own file is you have to change this,
Yeah.
what your image name is, and what your web app name is.
Is your image name always gonna be the same as the project name or file name?
It should be something similar. As you can see, I just add -image on the end of mine just to kind of say that's my image and that's my web app. Just kind of well named stuff.
So where's the operating system in the container?
So that's an image that Microsoft has released.
Well, that's the image.
Yeah, so this is the base image. This is what we're starting with. So this is the official images for everything on that. And it will give you. So it's actually a Linux system.
64
Mm-hmm.
AMD chip.
Yep, I believe so. Let's what was it? It was .NET Core.
What is that?
Image variants de facto. It will give you. Nope, I lied. It's a Windows Nano server. So it's their light version of Windows. But switching out and using one of these tags instead will give you a Linux version. It will give you a full Windows version. You can do a whole bunch of stuff there. But that's where it's getting what operating system that it's running on.
It's all Raspberry Pi.
That stuff is built to run on Raspberry Pis. That's what the Nano server, the Nano flavor is built for. So it's built to be very, very light. Raspberry Pi is a miniature computer. That's like this big, super lightweight, super awesome.
So, related but unrelated, .NET Core, ASP.NET.
Yeah.
What are they? So what's the difference?
Yeah,
'Cause we've
so-
been debating it, but
So does anyone want to take a whack at that before I answer it? Because that's probably going to end up somewhere on like maybe an interview question or a demo day question.
I have those in the resume, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're going to be asked about it. So what's the difference between .NET, .NET Core, and ASP.NET?
So ASP.NET is the web portion of the .NET frame that allows you to do the web processing on a server.
Yes, it is the web framework in the .NET world. It's what allows you to use the .NET and allow you to use C# to make a website. It provides you controllers, views, MVC stuff. So yeah, that's ASP.NET. What is .NET?
.NET is the
It's what C#
Someone who's not
runs,
What?
It's what C# runs on.
It's the
It's what C# runs on to uncompile or to compile it.
uncompiled.
On-
Once it's compiled, it's what actually is running your code.
is
It's
that like a JVM? Okay, so that's the machine.
yeah, it's what's running your code. So the .NET framework is just a way to run your code. So what's .NET Core?
The new version.
Across multiple platforms.
Yes, it allows .NET to be run across multiple platforms.
What was that?
It allows .NET to be run on multiple platforms.
And,
That was .NET Core.
What's the difference between cross-platform and interoperability? How do you say it?
Interoperability,
Interoperability?
not much. There's just one fancy way of saying one.
Function method?
Okay, just out of curiosity.
Mhm.
Because my mind is
Yeah.
old now. What's the difference between pre.NET? When you were running applications, were the applications specific to the hardware?
No, they were just running.
Windows
Yeah.
3.1, when
Yeah.
Windows came GUI,
It was just C++. I forget what compiler language they used and what they used to
but what
run.
was running, but it's geared to the hardware, so
Yeah.
that you didn't need, this .NET, this virtual machine. It was just running on the physical machine, on that chipset. And
It was compiled to run on that. So it was still taking your code and compiling it to run on the machine. But it was actually, you had to say, hey, what machine am I going to be running this on?
Right.
You had to tell the compiler, like, hey, I'm running this on an Intel chip. I'm running this on a Dell chip. I'm running this on a Microsoft chip version.
A Spark. Or an Intel.
Yeah, whatever was the popular chip back then.
So it's hardware specific.
And .NET Framework, and .NET was kind of a way like, hey, we'll worry about that. Just run against our standards.
Which was the big selling point to Java, I think.
Yeah, it's a direct competitor with Java.
Right.
A better competitor, but
But initially it was Java that started.
Yeah. Microsoft went, Java sucks, but we love it
He
now.
wants you to give him the thumbs up right now.
You can do whatever you want. I'm not going to stop you.
I see a big debate coming up here.
Anyway,
So ASP.NET would be to C# what React is to JavaScript.
Or Rails is to Ruby.
Are we
No.
still gonna work with framework?
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be one of the spin-off lectures. So we've been using .NET Core, the new modern way to do .NET. There's something called .NET Framework, which is .NET but limited to Windows.
And you need to know it because companies in the area
It's still very popular. It was like the thing until like 2 years ago. So there's a whole bunch of apps still built on it, still being built on it, and it's still going to be supported going forward. So it's not going away,
great.
at least any time that we know of for the foreseeable future. So you still need to know it, but the similarities are like 90-95%.
It just compiles different.
Yes, because under the hood, .NET Framework is a lot of wrappers around Windows native libraries. So like it calls like, hey. So for like list, this is going to be an extreme example. Like, hey, list, I want to sort this array. Hey, it's going to call whatever Windows used to sort an array. So it's just like a wrapper around the Windows libraries, and that's it. Well, that's not really good for a Mac or a Linux or some other platform. So they had to rewrite and re-implement all of that from scratch.
All the methods.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's like an intermediate language.
Mhm.
And so it all comes down to one, and then that goes to all operating systems.
But at some point they're gonna drop support for that. Eventually migrate to.
Personal opinions is probably. I would. If you're maintaining a product, if you're maintaining two products that do pretty much the same thing, wouldn't you want to drop one for the better one? And the problem is that like .NET Framework, like you've probably interacted with the .NET Framework app today. You've been online, you've perused a couple websites, right? You've moved around town a little bit, so like there's a good chance you've interacted with the .NET Framework today. So it's like everywhere, so it's hard to drop support for that. But
Compile it to an exe file.
and it still does DLLs and stuff like that. You can compile it to an exe. It's just the way what's inside of that DLL is different.
Eventually after they get so many people to move over, they'll
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Windows XP or
Yeah,
whatever.
but then what they do is you're gonna move over, so we're dropping support, and that's how they get everybody back.
but that's going to be 10 years down the road. They just dropped support for Windows XP.
So, yeah,
So like a lot of companies, I'll just call out Performa for one. Like they started building their app last year, I believe, about a year ago-ish. .NET Core was still a new thing. They didn't want to take that risk of adopting a new framework because it was still
right.
like I've been teaching for 2 years. .NET Core was in beta when I started teaching, and now we're on 2.1. So it's coming along really fast. But when it was still in 1, it was still in its infancy. Things have changed. Things were changing. Performa didn't want to bet on it. On the flip side, Presence, another software company, they built their MVP in .NET Framework. As soon as .NET Core came out, they redid their entire architecture to be .NET Core. So they completely switched over They wanted to be an early adopter. It was important to them as a company to be an early adopter of technologies versus Performa, who's like, I want to build a solid product on a proven platform first, and let someone like Presence handle with any issues that will come up.
Submit the bugs.
It's very different mentality. One's more for long-term support, and the other one's more about future-proofing.
But like it comes down to like which mindset do you want? Do you want to be an early adopter? Do you want to install the latest version, deal with those bugs? Maybe your app will be a bit faster, be a bit lighter, be a bit modern, but it could have some things wrong with it that could be just unfixable for now. Or do you use a tried and true workhorse?
Java.
I was actually just gonna say, like, Java is the thing. Slack is built with Java. Like, it's a tried and true. It's a technology that's been beaten and proven. Same with the .NET framework. It's been tried and proven and beaten. Ruby on Rails, tried and true and beaten. Like, it's these things have been build these applications that work. They're always changing. There are always new models, always new ideas coming out, like .NET Core. Some companies don't want to take that jump. Some companies do. Just to give you two ideas of two different companies, both .NET shops.
Yeah, there's risk investors and they're not risk investors.
Exactly.
Plus Proforma's been around for 40 years, right? So
Yeah,
they're not going to try things like that.
exactly. They have
Whereas
entirely
Presence is only a couple years old, and they just got like a huge investment, so it's
good for them. So yeah, how are we feeling on deployment?
Cool, follow the video.
And it's nothing too crazy, right? I mean, it's like these 6 commands and that's it.
Another one of those like process, it's like checklist to
Mm-hmm.
go through, do this, do this, do this, do this.
Yep.
When you said massage, basically change the order.
Yeah, like-
That's
That's it.
not a big deal.
So, all right, that's it. So for the rest of the day, open lab to work on final projects. There will be no formal review at 2 unless I get a lot of the same questions about final projects.
Okay, sounds good.